Welcome back, another devlog here. Something really simple, but important. We have a bunch of components that have warnings on them. A good example being this here, the character controller, with the warning about the lack of official support for rigid bodies. However, we had a bunch of people asking for additional warnings on additional components, and it was like really fragile and brittle the way that we were doing it. The way that we were doing it was the component had to inherit from iCustom Inspector, and then it had to handle its own sort of setup and teardown of that warning. There was actually like 3 lines of code that were repeated over and over again. It was like set up some styling. You can see here the styling of the min height, and then go ahead and build it, and then it had to do some other stuff to then call into the standard Inspector UI building code as well. So that it wasn't maintainable, particularly because we had a bunch of other people asking for additional warnings. So I've refactored that into a nice attribute. So you can see here the character controller component has an inspector header with this being the warning, this being the height. The character controller warning is larger than the other ones, so I wanted to enable a specifiable height. But you can see that we also have the warning on the primitive member editor. This is the one that sort of says like, hey, you can use it for ref hacking, but maybe don't. And then there's also one on simple avatar protection. That is the one that sort of talks about how if you interact with the component wrongly, it'll self-destruct, etc. And they all use this header, very simple attribute, and we just pick up that attribute inside the inspector generator, which you can see up here. We say, hey, does the worker type have the inspector header? And if it does, go ahead and build it. So that should allow us to add more warnings to a bunch of components. For example, all the facet presets, which is one of the other issues, I'll link it in the video description, now has a warning. I'll get that locale PR out soon, but this is cool. I don't imagine that we'll be using this for like intense documentation reasons. I just saw an opportunity here to sort of simplify things a little bit that will also help us when we're redoing inspectors. See you soon.